Black Panther Wakanda Forever was actually pretty good. Marvel Phase 4 has kinda blown with a few exceptions, so I'm glad it ended on a strong note. Now, I wouldn't say it's a great movie, but it's definitely in the top half of the MCU and maybe even in the top third. So what makes this movie pretty good, and what are the problems it has? Let's start off with the good. Oh, and spoilers for the movie. The tone of this movie is pretty much what I want my MCU movies to feel like. For me, an MCU movie should be relatively serious, with a fair amount of humor and lightheartedness sprinkled throughout. When Marvel movies focus too much on humor, like Thor Love and Shitter, then I find it hard to take it seriously. Now, Wakanda Forever is a bit more serious than most MCU movies, but I don't mind that at all. It's dealing with some pretty serious themes. With the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, this movie was in a tough spot. So right away, I must give credit to the cast. In the first movie, the two lead characters were clearly T'Challa and Kilmonger. They carried that movie while everyone else were good characters but supporting ones. Since T'Challa and Killmonger aren't in this movie, with the exception of a brief Killmonger cameo, all the supporting characters from the previous movie are now the main characters. Shuri was designed to be a supporting character, so it must have been an incredibly difficult task to turn her into the protagonist, and Koogler did a fantastic job at that. One thing I love in a story is when the audience is in the same shoes as the characters. Now, we aren't grieving the loss of T'Challa the same way his family is, but most of us understand that feeling of loss, and thus we're able to empathize with these characters. The story of this movie is basically about how people deal with loss and what one will do for their family. All the main characters that are Wakandans are grieving the loss of T'Challa, and the main villain, Namor, isn't dealing with loss per se, but his entire mission in the movie is to protect his people, something that someone dealing with loss can understand. If you know me, you know I'm a simple guy. I like stories that give characters arcs and send powerful messages. In Wakanda Forever, Shuri's story is pretty much about the effects of loss and what it does to people. There's this great scene in the beginning of the movie where Shuri is talking to her mother, and the way she describes her grief is that she wants to burn the whole world down. That was a great way to describe the feeling of loss, because sometimes emotions can be hard to put into words. Throughout the movie, Shuri is still dealing with the loss of her brother, and things only get worse when her mother dies as well. She starts to have a rage burn inside of her, which leads to the emotional climax of the movie. Shuri has Namor beat. The man who murdered her mother and is threatening to burn the whole world down is at her mercy. Shuri is pretty much put in a Star Wars-esque moment. Will she turn to the dark side and murder this man, or will she choose forgiveness and mercy? In the last act of the movie, she pretty much has an angel and devil on her shoulder, the devil being Killmonger and the angel being her mother. She ends up resisting the dark side and forges a truce with Namor. Then the movie ends with her looking back on her memories with T'Challa with not pain or anger, but with joy. Shuri went on an arc about grief and pain and how that can lead someone to destructive decisions. Had Shuri killed Namor, then Wakanda and Talokan would have definitely been at war forever, but she chose peace, and that decision will likely lead to a strong alliance going forward. Shuri's arc isn't revolutionary, but it was well done, and that's all I can ask for in these Marvel movies. Next, let's take a look at Namor. Is it Namor or Namor? Because I'm pretty sure they pronounce it both ways in the movie. But anyway, for the second time in a row, the highlight of a Black Panther movie for me was the villain. Namor is a fleshed out and three-dimensional character whose goals and motivations are clear. The most important thing to Namor are his people. He will do anything to protect Talokan and its people. Actually, now that I think about it, do his people have a name? Like the blue people, is there a name for their species? It's likely I completely missed it, but for the rest of the video, I'll just say the blue people. So Namor will protect the blue people at all costs. When the outside world is potentially threatening Talokan, Namor is ready to go to war for it. Namor is an empathetic villain who is clearly a gray character. When it comes to protecting his people, he seems like a good and noble king, but the way he wants to handle the rest of the world is clearly evil. He also shows no remorse when he kills the Queen of Wakanda. But the most important thing is we understand why he has these beliefs, and the movie explains that to us. Now, I did find his motivations to be rather weak. Since his people were once forced out by colonizers like 500 years ago, he has a strong hatred for the surface world. But maybe it's just me, but it seems like he was forced to move to a much better place. The underwater city of Talokan was beautiful, and everyone seemed to be happy and thriving. If the writers wanted us to really feel for Namor and his people, I think it would have been more effective if they had this wonderful home on land, and then they were were forced to move to this underwater city that sucked. This way, it's far easier for us to empathize with Namor's hatred for the surface. But I will say this, I love it when the motivations of both the hero and the villain are rather similar. Shuri, as I said before, is dealing with loss, and she understands the pain of losing one of her own kin. Namor's whole goal is to protect his people. So if there's anyone in the story who would understand Namor best and spare him at the end, it would be Shuri. She knows that feeling of loss and that feeling of wanting to protect her family whatever the cost. So she's able to relate to Namor because he's protecting his family too, and why would she want Namor to suffer that same feeling of loss that she has? This is what makes a great character dynamic, and it's the biggest reason why I enjoyed this movie. Now I'm gonna share a few of the things that I disliked, and by the end of the video it may seem like I don't like much about the movie, but remember, the main characters and their journeys are by far the most important thing to me. And since Shuri and Namor and their dynamic were executed wonderfully, there's a good chance I'm gonna like the movie. So my dislikes. I kinda touched on this before, but Namor's motivations didn't always work. The whole reason he is doing what he is doing is because he fears that the surface world will come to Talocan and ravage it for vibranium. But do humans even have the technology to get there? When Shuri went to the city, she would have to go through all these water streams that would take her deep underwater to the city. Human beings besides Wakanda just simply don't have the technology to get there. Maybe they could send some people in their thick suits to get to Talocan, but would they be able to pose any threat? No way! So throughout the movie, I'm just thinking to myself, the surface world really poses no threat to Talocan at the moment. Even if they find vibranium, there's no way human beings, especially America, are getting to Talocan. Namor claims that he and his people are strong enough to not only wage war against the entire world, but also defeat Wakanda. First of all, I just don't buy that their species are these all-powerful beings. Like, sure, they can win these one-on-one fights against cops, and they can pose a fight against some of the Dora Milaje, but I don't know, there's nothing in this movie to suggest that these people are super strong. Namor is, but his people, I don't buy that. And another thing, if this species is so strong, then why attack the whole world when you could just easily defend your city? You not only have an immense geographical advantage, but you also have the stronger technology, and you are supposedly the strongest beings on the planet. Just play defense the entire time. So that was one thing about the movie that was mildly frustrating. Another aspect of the film that I wasn't too fond of was the inclusion of Riri Williams. I actually quite liked her character and thought she was charming and entertaining, but I found her inclusion in this story to be quite unnecessary, and it made for a long movie much longer. Yes, I know the whole reason this conflict starts is because she is a scientist and her technology allowed the Americans to find vibranium. But remember, the plot isn't centered around Riri Williams. She just gets it started, and Namor even says himself that it's about the entire surface world, not this scientist. There must have been a better way to get this conflict started than to center it around a character who's pretty much irrelevant for the second half of the story. If you take out Riri Williams from the final act, she's just there as an extra weapon in the battle. So as much as I like her, she was a bit unnecessary to the story. One other thing that was a bit strange was that the movie ended with an entire plot point unresolved. America thinks Wakanda not only took down one of their Navy ships, but also attacked Boston and stole Riri Williams. Yes, Everett Ross was there to say that it wasn't the Wakandans, but he was arrested at the end for treason. There was no way the entire American government would believe him. It was said that the president was ready to go to conflict with Wakanda, and then it wasn't addressed again. Maybe that could lead to something else going forward, but to me, that's a plot point unresolved. Also, a lot of the American politics were unnecessary in this movie. Did we really need to see the storyline of Everett Ross and his ex-wife? No. And the last thing that kind of bugged me was something minor, but it was the location of the final battle. It's just on a boat in the middle of the ocean. Earlier in the movie, there was a battle in Wakanda, and that would have been a far better location to set the final battle of the movie than on a boat. But those are my major complaints about this movie. I don't really have anything else negative to say, just some other thoughts. Visually, this movie was far better than the first one. Everyone remembers how awful the final fight between Killmonger and T'Challa looked in the first movie. It was really bad. But here in this movie, I don't recall any moments where the graphics were jarringly bad. The CGI looked good, and the battles in the water were fantastic. It makes me wonder if this movie took inspiration from another movie that's coming out this year that's about blue people in the water. And lastly, this movie did a beautiful job at paying tribute to Chadwick Boseman. I almost got emotional when they did the standard opening Marvel title card, and it was just a bunch of clips of T'Challa in the movies. That was touching. Which was better, Black Panther 1 or Black Panther Wakanda Forever? I think the first one was significantly better. I know it's unfair to Wakanda Forever, but the other movie had Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, and I just really enjoyed that character, so I'm always probably gonna enjoy the first one more. The first movie also seemed to be a bit more focused, and even though both villains were great, I did like Killmonger a lot more than Namor. His goals and motivations just made a lot more sense to me, but both movies were pretty good, even though I liked the first one a bit more. Now, if I had to rank the Phase 4 movies, I would probably go number 1, Spider-Man No Way Home, number 2, Eternals. Yes, I know I'm the only person on the planet who likes that movie. Number 3 would be Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Number 4 would be Shang-Chi. 5 would be Black Widow. 6 would be Doctor Strange 2, and 7 would be Thor Love and Hot Garbage. Phase 4 as a whole was pretty mid. It has some good movies and it has some bad movies. Same thing with the shows. But overall, I feel like the phase had no direction. It was a strange decision to not have an Avengers movie end off the phase. But we're getting 2 in a few years, so we'll see how that turns out. And those are my thoughts on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. It was a pretty good movie, and there's a decent chance I will go see it again. I would rate it an 8 out of 10, yeah. Pretty good, but not great. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to hit the Claude Squad, and I will see you guys next time.